today is the day, and I think I say this like at every great event in our boat life.
We're gonna do the wet install of the compression post.
Yay! Finally, one job ticked off the list 5 weeks later.
I must say this is happening. This is all going a lot quicker than I thought. I thought we were going to be here all night.
What a malarkey that was. I have no words.
New shaft, new bearings, new oil, new grease, new everything. It's as good as it's ever been.
Welcome to our self-inflicted adventure. I'm Kiara and this is Adam. A few years ago, we walked away from our life on land to pursue travel and adventure aboard our floating home, the Millennial Falcon.
Last year saw us improving ourselves and the boat whilst we tackled our first Atlantic circuit. Join us as we come full circle back to the Caribbean, where we'll commence preparations for our next big challenge.
Previously on Sailing Millennial Falcon, we hauled out in St Martin with a small list of big jobs. Number 1 was replacing the base of our compression post.
So, out with the old, in with the new. I've had the guy put some gussets in and some bolt holes. There's a big piece of G10 plastic downstairs that I'm going to glass into the bilge that this will sit on.
As well as removing and reinstalling a new propeller shaft to replace our old bent one.
Sending parts in was proving to be a long and delayed nightmare, so while we waited, we worked. Pretty much starting at the front, working my way onto the rest of the boat in order to start repainting. We also found a few unexpected surprises.
If you sign on for $5.95 in the next 3 minutes, you'll receive some rotten wood. Timber basin of what will be the shower bilge.
Yeah, so the gas locker floor was all rotten and trashed.
We also injured ourselves. A lot. Second injury on the leg.
It leapt out of my hands and it jumped straight into my lap.
But after many weeks, things were finally starting to turn around, and we could make some progress on the initial repairs that we had actually hauled out for.
Hang on, you just got to take the front one back a bit.
What?
Take the front starboard back a bit. Okay, try now. Push it in.
What? Okay, it's happening. Today is the day, and I think I say this like at every great event in our boat life.
We're gonna do the wet install of the compression post into the bilge. Now we have to glue it down, well not glue it down, but set it in resin so that it sort of self-levels and sorts itself out. And we're only kind of going to get one shot at it. So,
bullet points of what we're doing?
Right, so the roof is semi-jacked up. It's going to be jacked up a lot more. The plan is to jack it up, smear sort of thickened epoxy under there in the sort of area. Smear it on here as well and like gently place it under the plate. Locate it with the markings that we've already put down. And then line everything up and then unload the jack, which will then apply pressure to the lot, which should force all of the thickened epoxy to any voids or any gaps or any slightly less than perfect surfaces, so that when it's dry, the entire plate is taking some load, as opposed to like one corner or the other corner, you know.
Alright. Oh yeah, smear it on. It's like making a double layer sandwich. A Victoria sponge.
Since the boat changes shape a bit when it's resting on its keel on the hard versus when it's floating in the water, we had to make sure that the compression post was in the right place, which was pretty hard to do. Thankfully, throughout our many dry fits, we found that slotting in the floorboards while installing the compression post automatically put it into its correct position.
Alright, so this lines up. Alright, so do you think we're ready?
I mean, yeah, it's down on it. The pole is in the right spot.
Okay, you got it? Alright.
Yep. Squishing, that's good.
Yes.
Very good. Good squish.
Oh my god.
Not bad.
Oh, Adam. Oh, excuse you.
How do you feel?
Oh, okay, I better stop just fiddling with it. Okay, so after 5 weeks in the yard, I think,
and many tries to get this compression post in, I think it's finally done. I think it is. We fake
It's
tested
finally
it.
in, it's not done, but it's in.
Yeah, true. So we like put it in thinking that it was done 2 other times, and then this is the 3rd time, and I'm pretty sure that this is like perfect. So it's been a bit of a nightmare job, but I think it's in. I just want this job to be over and done with so that our living room can kind of go back to being a living room, really. Yeah. So in saying that, I'm absolutely ecstatic. It's actually in. Yay! Finally! 1 job ticked off the list 5 weeks later. Yes! Prior to splashing, we also screwed bolts into the 4 corners, just to make sure that it really wasn't going to go anywhere. Finally, we could tick 1 major job off the list. In the weeks that followed, we furiously worked away to try and finish up the remaining jobs, most nights working well until dark. We just wanted to get off the hard and back in the water and have our boat be our home again. Unfortunately, the more time that we spent finishing up the boat jobs meant the less that we filmed. So here's a summary of those busy weeks. We fit the last wood panel into our gas locker, fiberglassing inside, and installed proper plumbing so that the wood wouldn't rot again in the future. We still have to put a lick of paint on it, but it's looking much better than it was before.
We also fiberglassed in our new shower bilge, painted it and installed a new, more waterproof seat hatch so that the seacocks beneath stayed clean and dry.
When we were cleaning up the engine bay, we accidentally broke a throttle cable, which incidentally turned out to be really rusty anyway. So the binnacle came off and everything inside it was replaced. Once again, this was a really good thing as we found 3 small cracks in the old rusty steering chain, which could have caused a steering malfunction further down the track. Once the white decks were repainted, we had to put on some grip in the working areas. First of all, we taped off the space that we had to paint. Then we got to work. Trying to do this one-handed by filming is very hard, so I'm going to put the camera down and you can all just assume that I've mixed the paint, alright? We chose the calmest day of the whole fortnight and started the process, which involved painting, and then while that was still wet, sprinkling pumice onto the decks and sweeping it into place. Then later, when it was all dry, painting another 2 layers of paint over it. While it sounds pretty simple, here's a fast-forwarded 20-minute clip of us just doing the front. Needless to say, the batteries on the camera didn't last long, and you missed several hours of us painting, pumice blowing away, me frantically running to the shop to go and get some more, then repeat. Oh, and also trying not to paint myself into a corner. But finally, after our busy day, the decks were done, and it was time to see what it looked like. Alright, it's the great unveiling of the decks. I'm trying to do one satisfying long peel of tape, but it's pretty much stuck down like cement, so I'm like clawing at it and it's not very satisfying, I'm afraid. Oh yes! One long strip. Is this camera on still? Yes, it hasn't taken that long. Having spent 6 hours putting the tape on, it shouldn't have been any surprise that it took almost as much time taking it off. So the grand unveiling was experienced in the dark, but here's what our decks look like today.
After we had our decks looking great, we spoke to the fabricator who was making up our new bowsprit. He'd come to the boat several times to make sure his new piece was a good fit and that the bolt holes were in the right place. And at last, we were finally able to collect it.
Look at our gorgeous new bowsprit! Just came back from the welders today, and if it all fits, then he has done a fine job. It's looking super sparkly though. Just gonna dry fit it now, and if it's all good, we'll actually pop it down with some 4200, and then the bow will be back on. So at this stage, we need to go back in the water on Monday, and it's currently Friday. As you can see, decks have just been done, but nothing else has actually been put on at this stage. So there's a lot to do. It's all going to come down to the last minute. It's okay, we can do it. We can always do these things. So many hours in the day, it's fine, it's fine. When we knew that we were going to be on the hard for a little longer than we thought, we recruited a spray painter to sand and repaint our topsides. This meant taking off the old to put on the new.
Yep, that's a lot easier than I thought it would be.
One whole letter at a time. Oh yeah. You know what? The M is going to be the crowning jewel. Why did I just cut my nails?
I must say this is happening. This is all going a lot quicker than I thought. I thought we were going to be here all night.
What should we call our new boat? Joking. That was a joke.
Should we do a new font though? I think we should consider a new font.
We should do a new font.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts for doing a new font?
Yeah.
Tell us what font.
That's
Find it for us.
That just shows how confident we are that we're going to still be weighing up this choice by the time this episode ends. It's like, we live here now, trust me. You'll see this before we have a chance to remedy the situation.
The last paint job that was done by the previous owners was wearing very thin and was flaking and staining, so we were pretty happy with our new clean white results.
Alright, some of the hull is being painted today. So Adam and I are inside doing things. I'm finishing up the bathroom, the shower cubicle. Adam is now working his way back into the engine bay. Meanwhile, the guys are outside, they've finished sanding, and as you can see, shiny. They've just done the first coat. It's rained. They've left us on the boat without a ladder as well. So we had to recruit somebody to put the ladder back up. But it's looking good so far, I think. Super happy with the spray paint on the hull. Looks very good.
Now is a very good time to bring us full circle. The very first job that we did in the yard was removing the propeller shaft.
Okay, well.
Oh wow, it's out.
That was easy.
Really easy. Okay, that was significantly easier than I thought.
Well, what do you know, it does go easy.
Okay.
It also happened to be the very last thing that we finished.
On week 1, we ordered a propeller shaft from overseas, as none were in stock locally. After many weeks of delays, we could finally lodge a lost parcel report and get a refund on our order. In the meantime, local suppliers had restocked, so we could then use the refunded money to buy a propeller shaft locally. Unfortunately, getting the prop shaft back in was not quite as easy as it had been to remove it. Well, 2 hours, 10 minutes later, and not quite as easily as just hoisting the engine to put our new prop shaft in. We now have 2 new engine mounts in place, and the prop shaft is in. Luckily our friend Craig accidentally somehow managed to get his hands on 2 more engine mounts, which he's given to us, so we actually just really luckily had them spare here. But we now have 2 new engine mounts, a prop shaft in, all in 2 hours. Time to get back on track. How are you feeling?
No words. I have no words. What a malarkey that was.
Yeah.
Who knew? All this time I've been fretting about taking the shaft out. Like, oh, am I going to get it out? I'll have to do this, I'll have to do that. Came out like that. I don't know why I didn't put it together, that putting it back in would be harder than taking it out. Suffice it to say, it was.
I just wanted to take a second to clarify why it was more challenging to put the shaft back in as opposed to taking it out. If you were watching when I took it out, you would have seen that I had to bend it ever so slightly to get it past the skeg, and then it just sort of went pop and came free, and it was all very surprising. Now, in order to explain why it's more difficult to put it back in, I have to just quickly go through the composition of sort of the stern tube. So you have the stern tube, which is slightly larger than the diameter of the shaft. We have an 1 1/4 shaft. I don't know, so don't quote me, but let's call the stern tube like 2.5 inches, 2 inches, something like that. So there's some clearance there. At each end, you have a fixture that is essentially the diameter of the shaft. You have a cutlass bearing which goes around the shaft, exactly the size of the shaft.
On the inboard end, you have a stuffing box, which keeps the water on the outside of the boat, and that also has a diameter that is exactly the diameter of the shaft. It also then has a cupping piece that, like, essentially you stuff it with waxy wrappings, waxy braid wraps, and then compress them, and that's what keeps the water out. The challenge, so keeping in mind that we have 1.25 inch stuffing box, larger stern tube, and 1.25 inch cutlass bearing, which we removed, so that's really not a problem anymore. Now, had the skeg not been there, I may have been able to sort of cajole the end of the shaft into that 1.25 inch breach in the stern tube. But I didn't. I had a skeg in the way. And coming out, we could bend it until we got the little pop, which was the shaft sort of sliding just far enough to sort of flick out of the 1.25 inch stuffing box breach. That didn't work going back in. You're trying to, like, throw a dart through a hole down a hallway on an angle and you can't access, you have very terrible access. So what we had to do, what I thought would work, was we'll go in under the engine in the bilge and then sort of come at it that way from inboard. So you get it through the hard part first, and then you just got to convince it to go down the larger tube, which is a stern tube. That didn't work because the engine was in the way, so I couldn't get a straight shot on the shaft. So if the shaft's kind of like that and the engine's there, the stern tube runs like this, so it wouldn't go in. So I had a bright spark. I was like, all right, well, we'll jack up the engine. We've done that plenty of times. Should it be sweet? Only need 3 inches. We've got to get it up 3 inches, put the shaft in, put it back down. Foolishly, I forgot to remove the top nuts from the front mounts and tore the mounts apart in my urgency to get all this done. Very foolish mistake. Broke the mounts, which is why Kiara said, right, 2 hours later we've replaced 2 mounts and got the shaft in, and it all worked out in the end. So we did end up jacking up the motor, sliding the shaft in from the skinny end first, all was well, and then we put the motor back down, put the new mounts in, sorted out the mess that we created for ourselves. And that was that.
All right, shiny and black, non-shiny and black actually, shall I
Scuffed
say?
up and black. Well, new shaft, new bearings, new oil, new grease, new everything. It's as good as it's ever been. Hello! There's no play in any of those blades, so with any luck, this should be the last we hear from him for 2 years.
Significantly less play, in fact no play than when we first started.
Yeah, exactly. Straight out of the box it had more play than that, so yeah.